which is called Shaolin versus Lama. And you can see how important studying the sutras are. Thanks for coming. It's my honor to study the sutras with you this evening. Recitation and study of the sutras is essential for spiritual enlightenment and spiritual enhancement. We are lucky and blessed to have access to the sutras, as well as to be able to choose to study the sutras. Each choice that we make, each thought that we have, are all important on the path. And what you choose to fill your mind with is ultimately going to lead to who you are, what you are, your karma, and your destiny. Hearing one line of the sutras is better than hearing a million lines of nonsense or non-important information. If you just take in one sutra today, that's good enough. We're on the fourth pada. In the yogic system, the first chapter is the Dhamma, which is the universal law and the universal truth. It must be understood. The second chapter is practice, and they teach the first 5 limbs of yoga. The next chapter, they teach the top 3 limbs of yoga, and they're taught specifically in that fashion because you need to build the foundation and the body awareness before you can build the concentration and the breath work. In the fourth pada, it's the highest philosophy, and it ties all 3 of the chapters together. Let's begin. 4.1. Higher functioning skills and talents are attained through birth, herbs, mantras, self-discipline, or samadhi. See how it says herbs here? This is one of the reasons why I'm an herbalist. So sincere practitioners, intelligent practitioners make use of the herbs. 4.2. The flow of universal energy brings about transformation. These transformations evolve you and push you forward into your next birth. This is one of the reasons why, number one, how we react to situations makes who we are. If we act in an evolving way, if we take pain for purification, like it says, then we're going to evolve. If you get short-tempered or don't introspect about the events that have happened in your life and your decisions, then the events that are happening aren't going to evolve you spiritually. The other thing is, when you have the choice of what to fill your mind with, if you have access to the texts and you choose to fill your mind with the text, you will certainly be headed in the right direction. 4.3. It takes more mental effort to read and study than it does to just watch things that are entertainment. 4.3. The flow of energy in the multiverse removes obstacles to evolution, like how a farmer removes dirt blocking the irrigation system, allowing the water to nourish the land. 4.4. From the sense of individuality springs the created or fabricated mind. 4.5. Consciousness is one, but it branches into innumerable different types of activities and countless thought waves. 4.6. Only the mental state shaped by meditation leaves no impressions or influences. So everything else that you experience through the 5 senses, everything else leaves a mental impression. It's called a samskara. So in basic Sanskrit, there are definitely some words that you want to know. One of them is samsara. That's the cycle of pain and pleasure. It's cyclic existence. The other one is samskara, and samskara is a mental impression, and the samskara keeps you trapped in samsara. So very basic, very simple, very powerful. 4.7. A yogi's actions are neither good nor bad, whereas a non-yogi's actions are either good, bad, or a mixture of good and bad. This one here is a little confusing even to me. 4.7. Actions performed by yogis are neither white or black, but actions performed by others are of 3 types, white, black, or gray. I think it's because at this point you're supposed to have mastered non-harming in the second chapter. So I think what they're referencing is that if you master ahimsa, non-harming, that your actions are no longer get you caught up in samsara. 4.8. Good, bad, and mixed actions create subconscious impressions, habits, and desires that manifest when conditions are favorable. So there you'll be sitting, you'll be meditating, all good for a week or two, and all of a sudden a desire for coffee pops up. It pops up just at that time. So it can also be from your previous karma too. So that's why your thoughts are eventually going to become your words, and they're eventually going to become your actions. So when we're doing our meditation, when we're introspecting, when the thoughts pop up, you start to realize how important a negative or a destructive thought is, because that thought gets caught up in your habits and becomes habit, which becomes karma. 4-9. Even though it is divided by incarnation, place, and time, life is a continuous process. The uninterrupted close relationship between memory and subliminal impressions causes the effects of actions to remain intact from one life to the next, as if there was no separation between births. 4:10. Since the desire to live is eternal, these impressions, memories, and desires are beginningless. 4:11. Impressions and desires are bound together depending on cause and effect. When cause and effect cease to exist, impressions and desires cease to function. That is one of the main things that you learn, is that you're not healing the problem, you're healing the problem's causes. That's the whole difference. 4:12. The past and the future exist and are really a continuation of the same moment, but they appear different due to the different conditions present. These sutras here are very important. 4:13. The past, present, and future intermingle rhythmically and interweave within the 11 dimensions. They change the composition of physical properties into gross and subtle. 4:14. The laws that govern the transformations taking place as time changes from the future to the past to the present cause modifications in objects, but their energy is never lost and the reality around you remains constant. So even though everything's in a state of change and flux, the consciousness and the behind it, the background that's experiencing it, and the consciousness behind it remains the same. It appears that everything's different. It appears that all these events are happening in a different order, but it's really just the same thing happening over and over and over and over again. That's why when you're doing your meditation and you're detoxing from the senses, you go through a period of boredom and you go through a period of detox, because we get bored so easily and the mind is always looking for things in the senses. 4:15. An object has the same identity in all circumstances. However, due to the differences of mentality in various minds, each individual mind may view the same object differently. These next sutras you have to meditate on. 4:16. An object exists independent of its cognizance by any individual consciousness. What happens to an object when your consciousness is not there to perceive it? 4:17. A thing is known or unknown by the mind depending on whether it is noticed by it. 4:18. The underlying consciousness that is ever present throughout the omniverse always knows the moods and state that the omniverse is in. It is ultimately the master of the mind. 4:19. The mind is not self-illuminating because it has to be viewed in the light of the soul. I'm going to read all three translations for this one, guys. This one here I've been meditating on. It's popped up the last 3 days when I'm meditating, because when I'm viewing it, when you're viewing something, right? When you're looking at the memory, what I noticed was when I was looking back at my early memories from like 4, 5, 6, 7, memories that you haven't thought of in 20 years and they just bubble up during your meditation. When I look at it, every memory, there was light in it. There's always light in it. And when I was viewing it, I realized that I wasn't viewing it from the mind. I was experiencing it from the light of the soul. Let me give the next two transformations here. The mind is an object of perception and therefore is not self-illuminating. Third translation. The mind is not self-illuminating because it is the object of knowledge and perception for pure consciousness. So all the mind is it's a window that the soul experiences the physical realm through. That's it. That's what it is. And it experiences it through the 5 main senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and feeling. That's how it experiences it. But it's not what's experiencing it. What's experiencing it has to be viewed in the light of the soul. The mind itself is not self-illuminating. That's what they're saying. 4:20. The mind cannot perceive the soul and objects at the same time. This is another one that's very important. 4:21. Since multiple minds are able to understand each other, there must be an underlying consciousness that flows throughout the universe. Otherwise, there would be too much confusion because each person's reality would not be contingent on the facts of the reality of others. 4:22. The fourth pada is definitely complex. So it does take some meditation on the sutras. But if you do memorize all of them, you can grasp the pada. But you have to be able to grasp the entire pada. Each line, sutra means thread, okay? And each line is a particular thread that you need to weave the blanket. If you go to weave the blanket and you're missing some threads, the blanket's off. Or if you're putting a puzzle together and you're missing two pieces, you put the whole puzzle together, you can't finish it because you're missing the final pieces. So the whole pada has to be committed to memory, and you have to absorb its essence and embody it. So you have to do both. 422. Consciousness becomes aware of itself when it identifies its source, which is the soul, and then becomes one with it. 423. When consciousness resides in the soul, it fully understands whatever it perceives. 424. This is the high sutras. Though having countless desires and mental impressions, the mind exists for the sake of the soul because it can only act in association with it. 425. That's for the people who say, well, what's the purpose? Why do I have a mind? Why do I have a soul? How do you know that the soul's there? How do you know that this is real? They just tell you. Then you have to be able to explain it through logic and life experience. If you can't explain it logically, it's most definitely not real. Even higher truths. You have lower truths, middle truths, higher truths. And sometimes if you don't have clarity, you might think that the lower truths disagree with the higher truths. But if you meditate on them, there's no laws that disagree from the lower truths to the higher truths. It's just those that know the lower truths don't understand the higher truths. They're ignorant to them. So a lot of times they'll think that they don't exist, or they say, I don't believe, or something like that. So it has to be able to explain logically, and you need to be able to compare it to your own life experience and memory to make sure that it's real. 425. Once you know the distinction between the mind and the soul, questions about the nature of the soul come to an end. 426. Then consciousness is drawn magnetically towards the soul due to the gravitational force of its illuminated wisdom. Now here, it's not just once you understand the distinction of the mind and the soul, you have to understand the distinction between the mind and the soul, but you also have to purify your fetters. So your fetters, sensual desire, any desire that you desire through the senses, longing, sex, fantasy, food, any type of sensual desire needs to be purified. Some desires are healthy. You need to have the back desire to have your house, to have your food, to make the physical body exist. You have to have those little desires, but as you're meditating over time, they get less and less. So take care of your earthly stuff to make sure that you have a place to live, so on and so forth. Don't starve yourself, so on and so forth. But when you're meditating and the soul is completely liberated, in that state of peace, there are no desires. There's contentment, which leads to spiritual bliss. 427. If you are careless, thoughts and conceptualizations may separate the mind and soul. So here, 427, again, another really important sutra. As soon as you stop doing your mindfulness, your vipassana, your breath awareness, your body awareness, as soon as you stop, you fall right back into samsara. The first thought pops up, the first worry pops up, and then when it pops up, you're right back into that stress, worry, happiness type of cycle again. The soul gets fettered to it, gets caught up to it. If you really pay attention, before you go into a negative emotional state, you'll see that your soul gets cut. There's a string attached to it, and it gets pulled on it. Then after that, the emotions go. The mind starts to go. The deeper you go and the more that you do it, the better off that you are. 428. You should handle these thoughts, conceptualizations, and memories by being mindful, replacing all negative thoughts and non-virtuous intent with their opposing opposites, and eliminating self-centeredness. And again, self-centeredness, this subject really has to be studied by the practitioner, because there's so much information out there on ego, and everybody says, oh, he's so ego, and like ego has like this bad term, like ego's a bad thing. Selfishness, you call somebody selfish or self-centered, they get offended. Okay, Self-centeredness is the idea that you're separate from existence. Okay. And then when that comes up, you'd be like, well, I have to be separate from existence, or I have thoughts, I have this. So this is why you completely have to fully understand this is my intellect. This is my personality. This is my memory. This is my spirit. This is my body. And this is my soul. If you're not absolutely certain about these things, you won't even be able to grasp the self-centeredness, because it doesn't mean to completely lose your personality or to lose your ability to interact. You have to use all aspects of the mind skillfully. But it does mean that the fact that you know that you're only separate from the universe for a little bit, and that separation is an illusion, because space, time is changing, the universe is in existence, everything is in a flow of energy. So there, self-centeredness is, I exist separate from all of this stuff. 429. When you lose desire to possess even the highest rewards, then remain in this constant enlightened state of consciousness, Dharma Mega Samadhi occurs. That's the highest samadhi in yoga. This conscious, what is Dharma Mega Samadhi? The conscious cloud of virtue, justice, law, morality, religious merit, and steadfast decree. So another thing that a lot of people don't know, that has to be known, is that there's a literal physical and energetic change that happens when you start to attain these high states of consciousness. The elements in your body change, your physical body changes, your mind changes, and your spirit, your soul change, and they come to these higher states of consciousness. And when you get to the final level, your virtue, all this stuff, it literally fills the space around you. It's a cloud of consciousness. That's what Dharma Mega Samadhi is. 430. Then afflictions and karma are ended. 431. Then the shrouds of impurities are removed, and the highest pure infinite wisdom is attained. After this, there is little left to be known. 432. Then the sequence of successive mutations ceases to function. Personally, I think it ceases to function within you. The universe, I think, is still in a state of change, but the fluctuations of the phenomena are no longer able to affect your soul, because your soul has attained purity and ultimate wisdom. 433. Well, that's why the Buddha was able to sit like that, right? Like, how do you sit like this when somebody's being nasty to you and you're being compassionate to them without letting their emotions come into yours? Our emotions affect each other. So in order to do that, you have to be in a state that's unchangeable. And in the Dhammapada, which we'll be studying at 8, the Buddha does say that the saint, the monk, the enlightened one, the awakened one, I have so many different words, that they attain the changeless state and therefore achieve high happiness. So both this text and the Dhammapada are talking about the same thing. The Dhammapada does not talk about the physical and energetic changes that occur when you attain high jhana. The Yoga Sutras does. 433. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming. The sequence of movements take place moment to moment, but it's perceived only at the end of transformations. 433. This is another one. How important is this sutra? So everything's changing and changing and changing, but we only perceive them at the end of the transformations. It makes sense, right? But like I said, you have to have all of the suttas. If you're missing one sutta, there'll still be confusion, questions there. If you memorize every sutta and practice your austerity practice, you will attain enlightenment. 434. When experience has liberated the soul, the gunas absorb into nature, and the power of the soul reabsorbs back into itself. Then perfect independence is realized. So here it says the power of the soul reabsorbs back into itself, but really it absorbs back into the universal soul. So the creator, the source that created everything, there's a piece of that in your heart, in the inner right side of the heart. It's the size of the thumb. It's called the soul. it's scientifically proven that the physical brain can't store all your memories. So when you're meditating and a memory pops up from when you were 11 years old, think back right now to a fond memory of when you were a child. If you watch where the memory comes from, it does not come from your brain. So science has improved the soul yet, but honestly, I don't think there's enough money in it for them to want to do it. I mean, what are they going to do? Sell you? There's nothing to sell, right? So I think when it says it reabsorbs back into itself, it means that the soul absorbs itself back into oneness with the universal soul. And that's what I believe, that the halo on top of the Buddha's head, that's really his soul and the universal soul. And you could literally see the halo glowing. So it's something that becomes physically recognizable to people. 430. Oh, that's it. Fourth pot is a short pada. Thanks so much for studying with me. I really appreciate it. If there's ever any questions that you guys have, please put them in the comments. I'd be happy to help if I can, if I know. Dhammapada practice is at 8, and my translation of the Yoga Sutras is available on Amazon. Thanks so much.